Hey Hogs, this is another one of our line techniques, blocking technique video. We're going to go over the push block, which is the second part of the double team. So I've already gone over the base block, which is the second part of our gap progression. So remember, our gap progression is gap on over. So if we look here, if we look at the center, there's no one in the center's gap. So he checks on. He has a guy on him, so he has a base block. That's the second part of the progression. If you don't have someone covering you on you, then you go to over. So in this case, the play is going to the left. So we are responsible for our backside gap. So the guard here goes through his progression. No one in his gap, no one on him. There's someone over the guy backside of him. So he is going to make a push call because he is trying to push this down lineman over into the center's gap before he makes his way up to the linebacker. So essentially, this is a double team between the center and the guard. Both the center and the guard are working to the FBI, first backer inside, and they both have the same first backer inside that they're working to. Okay. So what they're trying to do, they're trying to push this guy over into the center's gap so he can work up to the linebacker because he has better leverage on the linebacker than the center does. And that's where he's at in his progression, gap on over. And the last part of the progression is FBI, which is first backer inside. So it says down here, the play side guard checks his gap. He sees that the zero technique is head up on the center. So he went through his progression, checks his gap. No one's there. No one's on him. And he sees that there's someone over the center, which is the guy over to the backside. He will make a push call. So his technique is his call, his line call. So he will say push, push, push to let the center know that there is a double team happening and he's pushing that guy over into the center's gap, and the center will be making a base call. So as I said, he's going to push the nose guard as he works up to the FBI because the zero technique has not defined what gap he's playing because he's head up. So we're going to force him to play that gap away from where the ball is being ran. Even if he was on the play side shoulder of the center, we still think we can push that guy over into the center's gap. We're going to try to. If this guy's too big and too good to let us do that, then we can just have it where the guard blocks down and the center works up to the FBI. We can do that and just have a down block and him working up. But we like to have double teams where we can. And we like to have the guy that has the best leverage to the linebacker keep that leverage. Okay, so we're going to try, even if this guy was on the play side shoulder of the center, we would still try to push that and base that. But during a game, if this guy's too good, we can make a down call and a down call, and we'll still be okay. When in doubt, block your gap. Yep, and I pretty much explained the rest in this description. So let's see if we can go check out some push blocks. And I like going back to this down block tape because there's a lot of good stuff in these tapes here for us. So we're going to talk about the technique for the push block. So right here, we're looking at the left guard. They're running power to the left. So everyone is responsible for their right side gap, their back side gap, besides these two, but we'll get into that later. So he's responsible for his backside. He's responsible for backside. He's responsible for backside. So they go through the progression. He's got a down block. He has no one in his gap, no one on him. So he looks over. He sees that the center has a guy on him. So he makes a push call. So he's going to push that guy over into the center's gap before he works up to FBI, which is number 26 here. The center has a base call. He's going to take his 2 steps, get his hands on this guy, gets his head on the play side number, and tries to throw this guy into his gap. What I want you to notice is that this push block, he's galloping down. So he steps with his gap side foot first, always, and then he takes a gather step, and on his third step, he's trying to run through this hip of the defender and trying to make it disappear. He's trying to throw that hip over into the center's gap before he works up to the FBI. So let's watch this guard here. He takes his first step, his second is a gather step, and then his third step is down into the hip. I want you to notice his pad level. This is exactly where I want him to be. I want him to be down on the hip, either using your shoulder or using your hands. And I want you to notice how much movement he gets on this down lineman to get him over into the center's gap. And then he works back to his FBI, his first backer inside. I would like him to keep leverage. Notice if you stayed on this side of the linebacker would be walled off from where the ball is being ran, and he would not be in the tackle. But I want you to notice his pad level is low. He's on the hip. If your FBI flows over the top, after that hip disappears, you have to peel back and try to block him past the hole. And notice he does just that. The hip disappears. Once that hip disappears, he will come back and try to block his linebacker. That's a perfect push block right there. The only thing is that we would like to try to cut this guy off from where the play is going. But still, it's a 4-yard gain, and we can live with that. We're going to watch the same guard here. We're going to watch the left guard. Once again, it's power. So here we're all responsible for our backside gap because we're running power to the left. So he has a down block. Same thing, go through our progression. No one in your gap, no one head on. So he goes to over. He sees that the center has a guy head up. So he's going to make a push call as he works up to FBI. And then the center has a base block. Okay, let's watch his steps. He takes a step with his gap side foot. He gathers. And then the third step, he's punching through the hip here, nice and low. You see that the center's doing a nice job already turning this guy into his gap. So there really doesn't need to be a big punch from the guard, but notice that this guy's thrown over. He's now away from where the play is. We have leverage on him. And now notice that this guard has to turn back and then has to try to push this guy past the hole. Okay, he needs to get on that linebacker and try to push him past the hole. But once again, notice we get a 4-yard gain here, and we can live with the 4-yard gain. I don't know if there's any push blocks here. I don't think there is. Okay, let's go to the actual push clips. I really don't think we need to see much more than that. I mean, the examples don't get much better than what we just saw there. Okay, we're going to watch the same player because he's very good at this. Okay, once again, he's taking his gallop step. Okay, notice the hand is down on the hip. Other hand is on the chest, or you could have both hands on the hip here. And I want you to see how he does not stop running through this hip. He does not get off this double team until this hip disappears, and then he works up to the first backer inside. So notice he steps, he stays on the hip. You see the hand is on the hip, and that guy's moving because the hips is the center of gravity, the center of mass for every person. So we want to get our hands there. We want to push where that center of mass is because that's the easiest way to move somebody. And he blocks this guy so well that he runs him in. Look at this. He runs him into a linebacker. This is the perfect scenario that we can have here. Okay, he blocks 2 guys with 1 block, which is excellent. That's exactly what we want to see. Okay, what I would love to see him to do now, though, is come back and block his FBI here. Okay, because 21 is his first backer inside, so I'd love to see him, once he pushes that guy over, him come back and block his FBI past the hole. Okay, this is a good example now. Here, the tight end has a push call because he went through his progression and he sees that there's a guy over top the tackle. And so he makes a push call, and the tackle has a base call. But now this defensive end slants on this at the snap of the ball. So now what I want you to notice, the next part of his progression, instead of chasing this guy, he just stays on his train tracks on a 45-degree angle and moves on to his FBI. Okay. So notice this, the hip disappears. So now the tackle, it's like the push block was done for him by the defensive end slanting in. So now the tackle just has a down block and is driving that guy past the hole. The tight end now just keeps a nice wide base and keeps working on his track to the first backer inside. And he gets to his guy and he pushes him back to back past the hole. Okay, he does lose his footing here, but I really don't care about what he does necessarily. I just want you to see that even though we have a push call, if this guy slants away, we just continue on our tracks to the next level. Okay. Now, if this guy were to slant into our gap when we have a push call, then that turns into a down block. That turns into a down block because now that guy's in our gap. And now most likely the tackle will be the one working to the first backer inside. Okay, we would just switch responsibilities. And here, this is what I was talking about. Now, this guard has a push block because he sees the center has a guy head up on him. But now this nose slants into his gap. Okay. Now, in theory, we could still try to make this a push block and try to push that guy over into the center's gap, but that'll be a really hard thing to do. That's why I always say on double teams, we should have 4 hands on the down lineman, but 4 eyes on the FBI. So, just in case, if that guy now slants into the guard's gap, he has a down block. The center needs to get his eyes on the FBI because if that backer tries to come downhill and fill that hole, that center needs to be able to come off and block him. Okay, so that's what happens when he slants into our gap. Okay, once again, it's the same guard here. I just want you to notice his pad level down on the hip. And notice how this guy gets uprooted out of his off the ground right there. Watch him now. He has no feet on the ground because we get underneath his center of mass, and now we are able to move him very nicely over into the center's gap. That's exactly what that's supposed to look like right there. Okay. This is the best example I can give as to what a push block should look like when you make contact with that down lineman. I hope that's easy for you guys to see and to conceptualize.